D'Artagnan does not tell you, Raoul, said Athos, in his turn, that he was reckoned one of the finest swordsmen of his time, a knuckle of iron, a wrist of steel, a sure eye, and a glance of fire. That's what his adversary met with. He was 18, only 3 years older than you are, Raoul, when I saw him set to work, pitted against tried men. And did Monsieur d'Artagnan come off the conqueror? Asked the young man, with glistening eye. I killed one man, if I recollect rightly, replied D'Artagnan, with a look of inquiry directed to Athos. Another I disarmed or wounded. I don't remember which. Wounded, said Athos. It was a phenomenon of skill. The young man would willingly have prolonged this conversation far into the night, but Athos pointed out to him that his guest must need repose. D'Artagnan would fain have declared that he was not fatigued, but Athos insisted on his retiring to his chamber, conducted thither by Raoul. Chapter XV. Athos as a diplomatist. D'Artagnan retired to bed not to sleep, but to think over all he had heard that evening. Being naturally good-hearted, and having had once a liking for Athos, which had grown into a sincere friendship, he was delighted at thus meeting a man full of intelligence and moral strength, instead of a drunkard. He admitted without annoyance the continued superiority of Athos over himself, devoid as he was of that jealousy which might have saddened a less generous disposition. He was delighted also that the high qualities of Athos appeared to promise favorably for his mission. Nevertheless, it seemed to him that Athos was not in all respects sincere and frank. Who was the youth he had adopted, and who bore so striking a resemblance to him? What could explain Athos's having re-entered the world, and the extreme sobriety he had observed at table? The absence of Grimaud, whose name had never once been uttered by Athos, gave D'Artagnan uneasiness. It was evident either that he no longer possessed the confidence of his friend, or that Athos was bound by some invisible chain, or that he had been forewarned of the lieutenant's visit. He could not help thinking of M. Rochefort, whom he had seen in Notre Dame. Again, the moderate fortune which Athos possessed, concealed as it was, so skilfully, seemed to show a regard for appearances and to betray a latent ambition which might be easily aroused. The clear and vigorous intellect of Athos would render him more open to conviction than a less able man would be. He would enter into the minister's schemes with the more ardor, because his natural activity would be doubled by necessity. Resolved to seek an explanation on all these points on the following day, D'Artagnan, in spite of his fatigue, prepared for an attack and determined that it should take place after breakfast. He determined to cultivate the goodwill of the youth Raoul and, either whilst fencing with him or when out shooting, to extract from his simplicity some information which would connect the Athos of old times with the Athos of the present. But D'Artagnan, at the same time, being a man of extreme caution, was quite aware what injury he should do himself if by any indiscretion or awkwardness he should betray his manoeuvring to the experienced eye of Athos. Besides, to tell truth, whilst D'Artagnan was quite disposed to adopt a subtle course against the cunning of Aramis or the vanity of Porthos, he was ashamed to equivocate with Athos. True-hearted, open Athos. It seemed to him that if Porthos and Aramis deemed him superior to them in the arts of diplomacy, they would like him all the better for it, but that Athos, on the contrary, would despise him. Ah, why is not Grimaud, the taciturn Grimaud, here? Thought D'Artagnan. There are so many things his silence would have told me with Grimaud's silence was another form of eloquence. There reigned a perfect stillness in the house. D'Artagnan had heard the door shut and the shutters barred. The dogs became in their turn silent. At last a nightingale, lost in a thicket of shrubs, in the midst of its most melodious cadences, had fluted low and lower into stillness and fallen asleep. Not a sound was heard in the castle, except of a footstep up and down. in the chamber above, as he supposed, the bedroom of Athos. He is walking about and thinking, thought D'Artagnan, but of what? It is impossible to know, everything else might be guessed. But not that. At length Athos went to bed, apparently, for the noise ceased. Silence and fatigue together overcame D'Artagnan, and sleep overtook him also. He was not, however, a good sleeper. Scarcely had dawn gilded his window curtains when he sprang out of bed and opened the windows. Somebody, he perceived, was in the courtyard, moving stealthily. True to his custom of never passing anything over that it was within his power to know, D'Artagnan looked out of the window and perceived the close red coat and brown hair of Raoul. The young man was opening the door of the stable. He then, with noiseless haste, took out the horse that he had ridden on the previous evening, saddled and bridled it himself, and led the animal into the alley to the right of the kitchen garden, opened a side door which conducted him to a bridle road, shut it after him, and D'Artagnan saw him pass by like a dart, bending, as he went, beneath the pendant flowery branches of maple and acacia. The road, as D'Artagnan had observed, was the way to Blois. So thought the Gascon hears a young blade who has already his love affair, who doesn't at all agree with Athos in his hatred to the fair sex. He's not going to hunt, for he has neither dogs nor arms. He's not going on a message, for he goes secretly. Why does he go in secret? Is he afraid of me or of his father? For I am sure the count is his father. By Jove, I shall know about that soon, for I shall soon speak out to Athos. Day was now advanced, all the noises that had ceased the night before reawakened, one after the other: the bird on the branch, the dog in his kennel, the sheep in the field, the boats moored in the Loire, even, became alive and vocal. The latter, leaving the shore, abandoned themselves gaily to the current. The Gascon gave a last twirl to his moustache, a last turn to his hair, brushed, from habit, the brim of his hat with the sleeve of his dowbelt, and went downstairs. Scarcely had he descended the last step of the threshold when he saw Athos bent down toward the ground, as if he were looking for a crown piece in the dust.